Chapter 26. The next morning, when I got to work, I found that Bill had sent me the information on the non-shifter he'd mentioned. She was the owner/manager of a second-hand shop in Yuma, Arizona. I looked up the name of her shop on the web and found that she had some of her larger items listed online. I went over every item, hoping to find something that would give me an excuse to go see her. I hit the jackpot when I clicked on the listing for a solid wood dining set. I called and set up an appointment to meet with her and look at it for the Monday after Thanksgiving. Before I knew it, it was Friday, the day before the wedding. Mom and Amber insisted that Devon and I not spend the night before the wedding together. I thought they were being silly, but we finally agreed. Devon didn't want me staying at our place without him. I understood his concern. For the same reason, I was afraid that staying with my parents would be endangering them and my sisters, who were in town for the wedding. After some discussion and checking with my brother, it was decided that I would stay with Rain for the night. I slept in his guest bedroom and Gavin took the sofa. The morning of the big day, Gabriel picked me up. We told my family that Gabriel was a friend of Devon's who was going playing chauffeur for the day, while the rest of us knew the truth, that he was there to make sure nothing untoward happened. Our first stop was my parents' house. There, Mom fixed us all a big family breakfast, Gabriel included. It was a lot like it had been while we were growing up, family in and out, everyone talking at the same time, and lots of food. "Are you nervous?" Shiloh, the youngest of the six of us, asked, excitement lighting her eyes. "No." I smiled at her energy, it was infectious. "Are you sure? This is such a big deal." She almost seemed to want me to be on edge. "I'm sure." I shrugged. I know what I'm getting ready to do, Lo. I know it's a big thing. I know Devon is the one. I have no doubts and no reason to be nervous. I glanced at Gabriel. If only they knew, the wedding is nothing compared to what's already been done. I thought at him, knowing he would hear it. He smiled and continued to listen to the girly squeals and chatter, all while watching the windows and made sure there was no threat. I pushed my food around my plate, not really hungry, but knowing I needed to eat something. "Stop picking at your food and eat it." Mom said, "It's going to be a long day. You and that little one are going to need all the energy you can get." "Yes, Mom." I took several more bites before pushing my plate away. I leaned back in my chair and watched as my sisters finished eating and took off on errands of their own. After breakfast, I had an appointment at a local salon to have my hair, nails, and makeup done for the ceremony. I could have done them myself, but the bit of pampering was a gift from Brittany. Gabriel took me to the salon and stayed not more than 15 feet from me the entire time. He waited for the 3.5 hours I was there, never once looking impatient or bored. In fact, he kept me distracted by maintaining a mental conversation any time there wasn't a stylist or technician making small talk, while at the same time keeping himself occupied by reading or playing a game on his PCD. When I was through at the salon, he took me to the fairgrounds, driving around the backside to a parking lot on the east side of the island where the gazebo that the wedding would be held at sat, and far from the main parking lot where guests would park. Someone had parked a travel trailer in the small lot. "What's this?" I looked at him, confused. "Your dressing room." He grinned back. "I'm going to dress at Mom and Dad's." "We thought this would be better." "We?" "The Anikitos, your parents, the Theron." "But where did they get the trailer?" "The Anikitos." Gabriel shrugged. I shook my head, odd. "But my dress. It's all inside." "And you?" "There's only one door in or out of that thing." He nodded toward the trailer. "I'll stay out here unless you need something." "You're a sweetheart." I leaned over and kissed his cheek. "Thanks." I climbed out of Gabriel's pickup and went inside the trailer, feeling well cared for. Inside, I found my sisters in various stages of dressing. They poured me a flute of sparkling cider and pushed me down on the sofa in the small living area. It should be champagne, Payson shot me a quick smile, but in deference to your condition, we opted for juice. Now spill. Spill what? I sipped from the glass and looked back at her. About Devon, she prompted. What about him? I knew what she wanted, but I was going to make her work for it, if I shared it all. Is he good? She gave me a devilish grin, leaving no doubt she wanted all the details. She wasn't going to get them. I couldn't help laughing. Of course he's good. I wouldn't marry a bad guy. Okay, so I was enjoying playing with her. I stood and set my glass aside as I started to peel out of the clothes I'd worn to the salon. I'd known I was still going to need to change, so I wore clothes that wouldn't mess up my hair when I took them off. But you've only been dating him what? 3 months? About that, yeah. I said, distracted. How can you know? How can you be so sure so soon? She had more than sisterly interest, she seemed desperate to know more than the situation warranted. I turned, looking her in the face. This is about more than Devon and I, isn't it? She blushed and looked at the floor. There's this guy. I grinned, I couldn't help it. That you really like. I finished for her. She looked up, meeting my eyes. It's more than that. How long have you been seeing him, Pace? I asked. About a year. And how long have you been living with him? I knew she was living with someone, she carried an added scent. It was something that hadn't been there when she'd last lived at home. I'm not, she started to protest, but I stopped her with a look. How did you know? I know you, Pace. I went back to shedding clothes until I was down to my bra and panties. Where are my underthings? It's all in here. Brittany slid open a pocket door, revealing a large bed in the small room. All my things were laid out on it. I shuffled through them until I found what I was after. I'm still listening. I wrapped the pale gold garter belt around my waist and fastening it. I want to bring him to meet the family. Payson hesitated. So bring him. You should have brought him this weekend. I sat on the edge of the bed and started gathering one of my hose in my hands so I could put it on. I didn't want to steal your big day. That's sweet, but you still should have brought him. I'd like to meet him. I've got to work on Monday and Tuesday, but I'll be back on Wednesday for Thanksgiving. Does he have plans with his family, or can you bring him back with you? I pulled the stocking up my leg, leaving the straps on my garter belt loose for the moment, then picked up the other stocking. His family's on the East Coast and he can't go back this year. I thought I'd see what you thought before bringing him. Bring him. We'd love to meet him, and I promise I won't tell Mom you're living with him, though I can't speak for the others. I pulled on the second stocking, then stood and slid off my underwear, fastening the garters to the stockings before pulling on the matching pale gold panties. Aren't those supposed to go inside the straps? Shiloh asked. I looked over my shoulder and grinned. Nope. She looked confused and I couldn't help laughing. What? She frowned. I could only laugh harder. I slipped off my bra, replacing it with a strapless one that matched the garter and underwear. Where's your custom? Brittany wanted to know. Custom? It was my turn to look confused. You know, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Oh. I blinked a couple times. I hadn't really thought about it. I trailed off. The dress is new, the boots and jacket are old. The clip for your veil is borrowed from Mom. Shiloh put in. But what about something blue? Payson asked. I'd totally forgotten. I have nothing blue. I didn't know what to do. Is it that important? I looked up at them, hoping they'd say no. I have something if you don't mind. Brittany offered. What? She went to her purse, pulled out a small box, and handed it to me. Not sure what was inside, I opened it carefully and looked inside. It doesn't really match your look, but it's blue. I also kinda thought it would make a nice tradition if we had one item we all wore at our weddings. She looked from me to our other sisters. I pulled the small bracelet from the box. It was delicate, and if it hadn't been made out of gold, I would have said it was lacy with deep blue stones set in what looked like random places all the way around it. It's beautiful. I admired the piece. What is it? Azurite, it's local too. Tracy had it made for me while we were dating. I looked at her again. I love the idea of one item that we all wear. Are you sure you want it to be this? Positive. Later, I can give it to Tammy, and the next generation can wear it too. I felt my eyes start to fill as I thought about the possibility that the baby I carried could wear the same bracelet I wore at my wedding, at her own. I'd be honored, Britt. Thank you. I blinked away the tears and put the bracelet back in the box, waiting until I was ready before putting it on. Are you girls going to stand up for me in your underwear? I reminded them we were supposed to be dressing. I knew we had to be running out of time and needed to get moving. They went back to getting dressed, and I turned back to the rest of my outfit, considering what should go on next. Garter, then boots. I murmured, reaching for the ring of elastic and lace, sliding it up my left leg until it rested about 4 inches above my knee before turning to the tall footwear. I slipped into them easily, running the zipper up the back of each leg until the soft tan leather hugged my legs just over my knees. I stood for a moment, wiggling my toes and flexing my feet until they were comfortable in the heeled boots. A flash going off made me look up. That's one for the album. Payson giggled, looking at her PCD. Let me see. I curled my fingers in a give me gesture. Send that to me. I said after seeing the shot. I knew Devon would love it, but I wasn't going to show it to him tonight. I picked up my dress off the bed and arranged it so that I could step into it without stepping on any piece of it. Can you zip me? I asked once I'd pulled it up and settled the thin straps on my shoulders. Shiloh zipped the back and stepped away. I turned and let them get a good look. Brittany was the only one who had already seen my dress. Wow. Shiloh seemed stunned. How did you ever get Mom to agree to that? Payson asked. I looked down at myself, trying to see what was so shocking. I mean, yeah, I knew it wasn't a traditional wedding dress, but I'd known the instant I'd seen it that it was meant to be mine. It was a pale champagne color, lighter than the pale gold of my underwear. The satin bodice was form-fitting from the spaghetti straps to the hips, where the lace outer skirt started and flared slightly. The underskirt ended mid-thigh, leaving only the open lace of the outer skirt extending to my ankles. You could see about 3 inches of hose-covered skin between the underskirt and the tops of my boots, which were several shades darker than the dress, making for a nice contrast to show off the delicate lace. Don't get me wrong, it's beautiful and perfectly you. I just can't believe Mom agreed to it. Payson said. I looked up and made a wry face. It wasn't easy, but other than a small wedding, it's pretty much the only thing I insisted on. I opened the bag that had my jewelry in it and pulled out the string of pearls that Amber had given me. She'd said they had been passed down in her family and meant to go to Devon's mate. She'd almost lost hope of being able to pass them down. I fastened the clasp around my neck and made sure they lay just right before adding the matching earrings. The last thing I pulled from the bag was the ring I'd gotten for Devon. He hadn't seen it yet. We hadn't planned to get him a ring because he won't be able to wear one most of the time. Wearing a ring is dangerous when doing farm work and working with equipment. It could get hung on something and you could lose the finger or the hand. Instead, we plan to have a ring tattooed on later. We've both heard that old wisdom about not tattooing a girlfriend or wife's name, because what if you break up or get divorced? But we were mated and that can't be broken. We both felt pretty safe about having a ring tattooed on. I was still debating having one done, as I had the ring he'd given me that had been his grandmother's. I slipped the ring for Devon onto my right hand and stilled, taking a mental inventory, trying to make sure I hadn't missed anything. How long do we have? I turned to look at my sisters. Shiloh looked at her watch, about 30 minutes. I was stunned to see that they were dressed and ready. I'd been so absorbed in what I was doing that I hadn't really noticed them moving around. Wow, you three look great. They all wore different dress styles in 3 different shades as we'd planned, ranging from pale gold to a dark tan. They all had their hair pulled away from their faces. Even Payson's short locks were clipped back, making her heart-shaped face and big brown eyes more noticeable. We'll be the center of attention. Until you appear, then no one will notice us, Brittany said. If we've only got half an hour, we better hurry. I picked up the leather bolero that perfectly matched my boots and shrugged into it. Help me with my veil. I sat on the edge of the sofa so Brittany could clip the length of lace that matched the skirt of my dress into my hair. Don't forget the bracelet. Payson held the box toward me. I held out my arm. Can you put it on for me? I took a deep breath and centered myself while my sisters did the things I couldn't do on my own. Using the practice and training I'd had to learn for shielding, I tried to calm myself. I let my breath out and reinforced my mental shields while I was at it. I knew there would be a lot of emotion around me this afternoon and evening, and I wanted to be sure that thoughts wouldn't slip their way into my mind. All set. Brittany stepped back at the same time that Payson finished with the bracelet. I stood, turning once. Well? You look great, they said as one. Shiloh came close and adjusted the fall of the veil over my hair. There, now it's perfect. A knock sounded on the door a moment before it opened, and Mom's face appeared. Are you almost ready? I knew it hadn't been easy for her, not being here to help me dress, but she had insisted on overseeing the last of the setup, leaving me and the girls to take care of each other. Come see. I invited her in. She stepped up into the trailer, closing the door behind her. My sisters all stood together and she took them in first, tucking in a stray curl for Brittany, straightening a ruffle on Payson's shoulder, and tugging Shiloh's dress straight before pronouncing them ready. You can go get lined up, she told them. We'll be out in a minute, and then we can start the procession. They filed out and she turned to me, her eyes pooling with unshed tears. She stood still for a moment, just looking at me. You were right. That dress is perfectly you. I couldn't help smiling back. I've done it before, but it's always so hard, giving up your baby like this. You're not losing me, Mom. I'll still be right here. But you'll have a family of your own, a husband and baby of your own. It just won't be the same. She shook her head. Not the same, no, but just as good, I think. If not better. I smiled and bent to hug her. She dabbed tears away with a wadded tissue. Come on, they're waiting on us. Outside the trailer, I found a small group gathered, waiting for us to emerge. Dad stood near my sisters, talking to Gabriel, next to the truck we'd arrived in. It was still parked near the trailer, so he could keep an eye on me, but he was now wearing a suit. I knew he would have left me alone, so someone had taken his place long enough for him to change. You look nice. I sent him a quick smile. You don't. You look gorgeous. He sent back with a wink. His mental compliment only made my smile grow as I stood, looking around, wondering what to do next. Come on, Mom ushered the girls and I around the trailer toward the footbridge we would all cross on our way to the island where the ceremony was to be. She handed them their bouquets as she sent each of my sisters, one by one, over the bridge and up the aisle formed by rows of chairs, waiting until they had in position before turning to me and handing me mine. My wedding bouquet had been a spot of contention. I don't know much about flowers, other than knowing what I like. When Mom had asked what I wanted, I told her small, not a bit trailing thing. When she asked what flowers, I had said deep red, gold and white. Knowing me as she does, she took that and ran. Amber had argued. She insisted that flowers were a language, and I had to have just the right ones or the whole wedding would be ruined. At first, I had ignored her, hoping she would drop it, but as the wedding drew closer, she got more insistent that I choose specific flowers for my bouquet. A couple of weeks before the wedding, I'd had enough. I lost my temper and told her that the bouquet was already taken care of. If she didn't like it, she could leave the rest of the planning to us. She'd gotten quiet for a moment, and then moved to the next thing we had to do, accepting that I wouldn't be bullied. After that, she'd been much easier to deal with. Mom touched my arm, drawing me out of the memory. It was time. I stood at the foot of the bridge that led to an aisle framed by rows of folding chairs, looking at the people gathered there. They were all there to see me. To see Devon and me promise to love each other forever, or at least for the rest of our lives. The thought should have been scary. I'd always heard how nervous people are on their wedding day, but I was neither. I spotted Devon at the other end of the narrow walkway, standing beside my brothers and brother-in-law. Across the gap left for me stood my sisters. Brittany was first as my matron of honor, then Payson, then Shiloh. They were standing in order of age, though I hadn't done it intentionally. Maybe Mom or Brittany had. Dad stepped up beside me. "Are you ready?" I looked up at him and saw the liquid pooling in his eyes. "I finally found someone as wonderful as you are, Dad. I can only dream of being as good of parents as you and Mom." I glanced back down the aisle at Devon. "I'm ready." He lifted his arm to me, and I took it. A single tear sliding down his face, he covered my hand with his. "Let's go." The music started, and together, we slowly made our way over the arching bridge toward the gazebo. We walked slowly, as my mother had insisted. I noticed that the naked winter trees had been strung with lengths of streamers that now fluttered in the slight breeze. We stopped in front of the judge, and Dad put my hands in Devon's, folding my fiancé's fingers over mine. "Take good care of her, son." Devon squeezed my hands. "Yes, sir," he said, solemn. My father took his seat in the front row beside Mom. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The judge started his speech. I tried to listen, but soon everything faded away except for the man in front of me, his hands holding mine. I looked up into his eyes, watching me. The smile on his face sent a bolt of warmth through my body. "Nicki, pay attention." Devon's voice whispered through my mind, and I struggled to focus on the judge's voice. "I understand that the two of you have written your own vows?" The judge looked back and forth between Devon and me. "Yes, sir. We spoke together." "Devon?" he prompted. I handed my bouquet to Brittany and turned back to Devon. Devon met my eyes as he spoke, clear and heartfelt. "I, Devon Ambrose Wilson, take you, Dominique Elizabeth Daniels, to be my partner, my equal, my other half. To me, you're more than a wife. You are my heart, my soul, my life. Forever." He slipped a gold band over my ring finger until he reached the engagement ring he'd given me weeks before. He twisted the new band against the first until the two fit together like puzzle pieces. "Let this ring always remind you that though we are two pieces, together make one whole." I looked down at the rings that now fit like a single wide band of gold around my finger. My vision blurred with unshed tears. "Nicki," the judge prompted. I blinked to clear my eyes and lifted them to Devon's face as I spoke from my heart. I had a home, a job I liked, my family around me, and for years I was happy. Nothing was absent from my life. Then you came home and back into my life. It was then I realized something had been wrong all along. Something was missing. I pulled off the ring I'd been wearing on my right hand and spoke again. "I, Dominique Elizabeth Daniels, take you, Devon Ambrose Wilson, as my husband, my lover, my other half. You are the something I didn't know was gone. You are the missing link that makes me whole." I slid the ring onto his finger. He looked down, actually paying attention to the ring. It was a solid gold band with a second band inlaid around the center. The inner band was an unbroken circle of chain links. Let this ring, and its more permanent translation, always remind you that we are much more together than we ever were apart. I squeezed his hand with mine. It all seemed so unreal. I could hear the judge's voice, but I wasn't registering what he was saying, at least until he said the words. By the power vested in me, by the state of Arizona, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. I tipped my head back and let Devon settle his mouth against mine. He wrapped his arms around me and pulled me against him, and my hands came up to rest on the back of his arms, and I left them there as I looked up at him after the brief kiss. Beside us, the judge spoke again, this time to the crowd. I now present to you, Mr. and Mrs. Devon Wilson.